All right, welcome everyone. Today we're going to be discussing Executive Board 101. This is a presentation that I am going to do for you guys. And yes, if you're interested in becoming the next B-star, you should definitely run for Executive Board. So we're going to start off this presentation with the role of President. So what is the role of President? The role of President is usually the face of the club. You'll be tasked with hosting the general and board meetings. You're tasked with delegating tasks to everyone on board, and sometimes even like the family heads, tasked with supervising both executive and appointed board. You act as a major liaison between the campus, club, division, and district levels. And you should generally be in everyone's business as appropriate. So sometimes there's going to be conflicts between members in the club. Sometimes there's going to be conflicts that a member is going through. Sometimes there's going to be ongoings with emergencies, such as the pandemic. When the pandemic happened, it happened during the start of the term last year. And I don't know, sometimes these things just happen. But basically, as the board, you're going to have to just deal with it. But definitely just remember that as the role of president, you never have to do everything alone. And you should always rely on your board. So now we're going to be covering the vice president of administration. The role of the VPA acts as the right-hand person to the president. They're generally in charge of the appointed board and making sure that all appointed board officers are on task. If there is an absent position on appointed board, or there's generally someone is unable to complete tasks and stuff, the VPA usually acts as like the right-hand person to like basically help right away. And they're also helping not just like board complete their tasks, but also help with board bonding. So help interpersonal like relationships. They also help with conflict resolution. Sometimes things happen on boards. Sometimes things happen between members, maybe members and board officers. Maybe there's like a sense of disconnect. The goal of the VPA is to help bridge that disconnect. They also act as another major liaison between the club and the campus level. Now we're covering the Vice President of Service. So the role of the VPS or Vice President of Service acts as the left-hand person to the president. They generally help reach out to events and keep contact with the person who is in charge of the event. So we're referring to the event chairs or hosts. Their goal is to also release the calendar events monthly and find or create service events for the club. These events can be an online event, an in-person event, generally whatever comes to your mind. The VPS works with the appointed service projects chair to plan service events. So whether it's planning large-scale service events where you maybe 40 people would show up to like service marathon, or some smaller scale service where maybe you're doing pet literacy and like 5 people come out. The 2 of them are in charge of all those service events, and they're in charge of advertising those events to members. But generally what I would like to say is just because the VPS exists and the service project chairs exists, Circle K still functions as a community service club, which means all officers, regardless of the position, all should contribute to service because this is a community service club. So it'd be weird, if only like a single person were to handle the entirety of service. That's simply not how it should be. But the VPS is the designated person when service comes into mind. Now we're referring to the treasurer. The role of the treasurer helps manage the entire club budget. This is our monies person. They oversee the club bank account and they record all financial transactions that have ever happened in the club. So if someone, such as like an event host, went out to pick someone for carpooling, maybe spent $30 on gas, they would be in charge of reimbursing that person as appropriate, but they would also make sure to like record it to make sure, we're not just giving money like left and right out of nowhere. Also in charge of collecting and paying for membership dues and importing members into the Membership Update Center, otherwise known as the MUC. They help raise money for DFIs alongside the fundraising chair and for admin funds. Admin funds are they stand for administrative funds. It's basically to help the club's expenses within the own club. So maybe we want to host an event of some kind. Someone or that officer would go to the treasurer to say, hey, I want to set up an event at this location. I think it costs this much to rent it. am I able to do so? The treasurer would generally determine if this is a good transaction and if it fits within the club budget. And as written here, the treasurer is directly working with the fundraising chair, just like how the VPS directly works with the service projects chair. Secretary. So what is the role of the secretary? Secretary organizes club event report forms, otherwise known as SERFs. So whenever you guys turn those in late, you make the secretary's work a little harder, so please turn those in. But generally, the secretary helps to update the monthly report form, otherwise known as the MRF, and the master record sheet to send to the district, otherwise known as the MRS. They also help record hours and keep accurate accounts of both general and board meetings on file. So generally with the board meetings, they would be the one actually writing down what happens and what is discussed during the board meeting and making sure we are accurate with our timings. So whenever I say, hey, we started this meeting at X time and then we ended at X time. So they would be the one recording that. They also work directly with the recognition and programs chair. They work with the recognition and programs chair mainly for collecting our updates and for helping like with recognition. So recognition would generally like to look at what hours a person may have, and they would usually go to the secretary. And once they get that worked out, maybe the recognition programs chair would say, hey, this person is doing a lot of service hours. I think we should recognize them for the next general meeting. So yeah, those are generally the 5 descriptors of the 5 positions. Now we're going to go over division and district leadership. These are leadership opportunities that are outside of the CSULB home club. So we're going to start off with the Metro Division. Metro Division has the first major position, which is Lieutenant Governor, otherwise known as LTG. And there's also a divisional leadership team. The DLT, which is the team I just described, has various different positions. It's just up to the Lieutenant Governor to decide what those positions are. There's usually a secretary, treasurer, and then some other positions that may occur as like a social chair or service chair. Some important things to note is that this is a good opportunity to dip your toes into a leadership position outside of the home club and meet other schools, understand the needs of your division, and how you specifically can help. Some more opportunities that you can see are from our CNH, California, Nevada, and Hawaii district. The positions available are on district board and district committees. District board is filled up of LTGs as well as the district governor, the district treasurer, the district secretary, and they basically manage everyone in the divisions, therefore everyone that is a CKI club within the district. District committees have more niche purposes. For example, the technology committee focuses on technology related needs of Circle K. There's a service committee that focuses on service aspects of Circle K, and etc. So you work as either a logistical or creative officer on the district level. However, when you do so, it is a big commitment. However, you could say that all of these positions are big commitments, but definitely on the district level, it's like if you're going to commit to district, it's highly recommended that you stay like committed. And generally, the district focuses on the member experience overall for all the clubs. Now let's talk about running for office. So how do I run for office? Well, you got the first step done. You're learning about the different positions right now. And generally there are 5 executive board decisions. Remember, there's president, VPA, VPS, secretary, treasurer. And you learn about these positions because you just attended this webinar. But another great way and important way for you to know is that you should talk to current board officers. So if you're interested in the presidency, I don't know, something tells me you should probably talk to me about it, you know? If you're interested in VPA, you should be talking to Lenore. If you're interested in VPS, talk to Diane. Interested in treasurer, you talk to Kobe. And if you're interested in secretary, you talk to McKenna. And our executive board office hours will actually be by appointment. And I will send more information about that tonight alongside with these slides and recording. So the second part of running for office is you have to ask someone to nominate you. And nominations are only on one day. They are Wednesday, February 16th during the general meeting. So if you want someone to nominate you for, say, you want to be nominated for president, you want to be nominated for VPA, nominated for treasurer, you got to ask someone to nominate you, or at least make it known that you're interested in running. A great way to make it interested and know that you're running is literally attending this webinar, but also just telling people. And when you're talking conversation, since elections are happening within 2 weeks, a lot of people are talking about this in the club, whether it's in person or even online on Discord. So if someone casually mentions, hey, elections are coming up, are you guys thinking about any positions? You should definitely let people know, I am interested in X position, and there's a good chance you'll be nominated if you don't direct ask someone, but you should direct ask someone. Other than that, you want to prepare a speech up to 7 minutes, and you want to prepare for caucus. And caucus is defined as a Q&A section, so questions and answers section, where members would come to ask things about your platform. So the speech and caucus must both be under the 7-minute limit. So some people like to make the speech like 4 minutes and then leave 3 minutes for caucus, for example. And we'll get more into that soon. The other step besides that is to practice all of that. If you are interested, in running, you're gonna want to feel like your speech is more natural, And also part of the speech is there's the actual speech that is required, but there's also the candidates literature that I will also cover later that is optional, but it is essentially something, it's essentially like a resume-like slide that you could put up during your speech and people can read it. But we'll get back into that a little later. And the last part you need to understand is the club election procedure, which we will go over today. And I'm going to really emphasize this. You do not need experience to run for any position whatsoever, including president. You can do it. If you have not had a leadership position at all previous to running, who cares? You should still definitely run. I definitely want to say a lot people are a lot more interested in potential than they are in, just because someone ran for a position before or was a position before doesn't make them qualified. And the same thing, just because someone doesn't have a position before at all doesn't make them unqualified. Characteristics do have a big play in it. And especially the performance that the club has seen you do over the past year. If you're, hopefully, you're one of those people that came out to a lot of events, service events, leadership events, talk to other new members, help the club atmosphere, you're probably a great candidate for any of these positions. Not saying that those who haven't aren't, but generally, the more seen you are in the club, the more people can see that you care. And that's the biggest part. It's less about the position that you have and more about, well, what have you done for Circle K and what are you interested in doing for this club? What are you interested in doing for your friends? So we're going to enter phase 1. So phase 1 begins with nominations. So how do nominations work? Nominations basically stand for a time where members propose another member for office. And then you guys should understand that members can actually be nominated for multiple positions. So if you are interested in president, if you are interested in treasurer and secretary, VPS, honestly, all of them at the same time. If you're interested in every position, you could technically be nominated for every position. Keep in mind, however, you also have to make kind of 5 different speeches. So generally, if there is a position that you feel stronger about, I would suggest that you focus on that position first. But if you are interested in running for multiple positions, it is entirely possible. And you can just have your speeches prepared for that. Additional notes that you should keep in mind is that every single participant during elections, from candidates to those actually voting, everyone in the room must be a dues paid member. If they didn't pay dues, then they can't vote. Simple as that. And nominations, once made, must be seconded by another member. So it usually sounds something like this, I don't remember the exact wording, but we'll go over it later. But basically, someone raises their hand during nominations. I'll basically call something like, we're going to open the floor for presidential nominations. If you have a member in mind, please motion everyone to, say the name stuff. So I'd raise my hand and say something like, I, Audrey Halim, nominate Audrey Halim for the position of president. And then another person would have to raise their hand and say, I, Audrey Halim, second that nomination. So I use my name because I don't want to use anyone else's name, but I'm going to use Nathan's name, for example, so it's less confusing since Nathan is a senior and stuff. Like, I, Audrey Halim, nominate Nathan Cortez for the position of president. And someone else would be like, I, Nathan Cortez, number 2, nominate, like, what was it? Second that nomination. I hope that makes sense. But basically, that's generally how it works. And we'll actually go more into the election process during elections. I will run off a script so that everyone in the club will understand how nominations and how the elections work. But the last thing you have to know for this is that a member cannot nominate themselves. So you must make it known that you're interested in running if you want to run for a position. You have to ask someone to nominate you. I mean, think about it. It's kind of weird to nominate yourself. So yeah, ask someone to do it. Easy. So nominations work in kind of a trickle-down fashion. So if you look at the right-hand side, you'll see the top image is like a line. People are generally in a line, shopping for stuff. And if you look at the bottom, there's a meme that I put there and says, and then we told them wealth would trickle down. That's a joke, but it's definitely not related to trickle down economics at all. We're actually going to look at the top picture. So how it works is if a candidate loses an election, they can still run for any or all of the positions, assuming that someone nominates them. For example, if a person runs for president but doesn't win, they can still be nominated off the floor for vice president of administration during the open floor and run. So if someone is running on the floor, that means that they were not previously nominated, but they were nominated on the spot during the day of elections. These people are usually making up a speech right on the spot. So if you really want to be nominated, I suggest you get nominated actually during the general meeting next week, so you can be prepared. So basically, the picture line, I think you guys can see my cursor. I had there because let's say the first person is president. Well, if you don't get president, you can still be the second person. You can be the vice president of administration, and etc. So if a candidate is running for multiple positions and they actually win an election for their first position in the hierarchy, they cannot run for the other positions anymore, assuming that the candidate accepts that position. And the hierarchy of position goes as president, vice president of administration, vice president of service, treasurer, and secretary. It's always going to be in that order, at least for CSB Circle K. So in this instance, let's say someone was nominated for VPA, VPS, and treasurer. If they won the VPA election, they can no longer run for VPS or treasurer. And I put the example below. If someone ran for VPS, treasurer, and secretary, but they lost VPS, but then they did the treasurer elections and they won treasurer, then if they accept the position, they are done running and can no longer run for secretary. So phase 2 is speeches. So how to write your candidate speech? Well, the rules are that there has to be a maximum of 7 minutes long, including caucus. You can decide personally how much time you want to give your speech and how much time you want to give to caucus. So some, for example, like to give 4 minutes talking, giving their speech. Some people, and then give like 3 minutes answering caucus questions. And a reminder for those who just joined the room, caucus is a question and answering session. So any members can ask you anything about your platform. And I definitely want to say this now. Sometimes during your platform, you will actually be grilled on your questions, but not to scare you. It's just they want to really check, if you're fit for candidacy. So just be prepared to answer caucus questions. Sometimes questions would be like, for example, if I were to run again, which I'm definitely not doing, but if I were to run again, definitely the question that I would want to ask if like someone like me was running is, hey, I noticed that this is your third term coming up on executive board. How are you going to deal with burnout? And that's a scary question to answer. So you want to be prepared for the answer because you only have 3 whole minutes to answer this. And the 7 minutes is like really strict. So as soon as your 7 minutes is up, like I'm not going to wait. I'm immediately going to call time. So you want to have time to answer your questions or answer the questions that are given to you in like a timely fashion, you know? The second rule is just don't slander your opponents at all. Like that's not safety. That is not cool. Focus less on your opponents and focus more on you. That kind of rhymes. But if you are a great candidate, you don't need to talk about the other candidates at all. In fact, you really shouldn't. It'll probably make you look worse. But yeah, just focus on yourself. Like, what can you do? So what is good to mention in your speech? Some things that are good mentioned in your speech, and this is not an end-all list. You can essentially write your speech on whatever you want, but these are just things that I personally recommend, are your qualifying characteristics. So these are not just your positions and your leadership experience that you held over the years. It could also be personality traits. For example, a personality trait that you could say is a characteristic that I have is that I am very good about like initiative. I like to take charge of things and I get things done. Or another one could be like, I am a responsible person. I always like to make sure I adhere to deadlines and stuff like that. Or if you were to list your actual positions, any leadership position works, not just the ones you had in Circle K. So you could definitely say something like, I have not had a position in college because I am a freshman, but what I held in high school was that I was a past president of Key Club, or I was a past LTG, or I was a past ASI member, or whatever it is called in high school. I already forgot. ASB. Or if you had a position outside of Circle K but in present, you could say, I'm currently a leading officer at ASI. I'm a judge in the ASI judiciary unit. I'm making stuff up, but essentially anything works. The next thing you want to think about in your speech are, what improvements are you personally hoping to implement in the club? How about in your own position? And how will you make the member experience better? Everything honestly should always tie back to the member experience because this club is for the members by the members. So if you are not thinking about general members, you're probably not going to be fit for this position. So yeah, you guys can do it. Now, there's a second part of speeches that is completely optional, is the candidate literature. So candidate literature is a resume-like one-page slide that shows your goals and qualifying characteristics. If you're interested in having this literature, I'm going to be giving out the rules and how to actually do this later on in a group chat with all the nominees on Wednesday, assuming that everyone accepts their nomination. So I'm just going to create a big group chat. I'm going to send in all the information down, and you guys will just be prepared by elections if you want to do it. But remember, you don't have to. But things to think about if you do decide to do literature is the color scheme, readability, and what will be shown on your literature versus your speech. If your literature is just going to be verbatim what you said on your speech, so like exactly what you said on your speech, it's probably maybe not so helpful, but it's up to you in the end. So yeah, you always want to be making sure like whatever you're doing in your candidacy, like can really help you. So if it's just a copy and paste of what you're saying in your speech, like what new information is being brought, you know? And an example of a candidate literature will be from Lenore. So if you look at Lenore's literature, she was running for vice president of administration at the time. And obviously she won. So she wrote down her major, her year, her experience doing leadership. She also wrote about all her hours, and she has a very great like hours track. Not everyone can be like Lenore. Lenore is honestly amazing. But if you have like a standout, like killer membership hours, which you can always get if you just ask McKenna, you just have to email him or honestly just message him and he'll tell you what your hours are. You should honestly put it on your literature or mention it somewhere in your speech. The reason why is because you're showing people literally the work you put into this club. You so notice that she put down skills, she put down time management, being organized, being detail oriented, and some qualifications are where more like personality related. She's compassionate, she's encouraging, she's approachable, she's flexible. I always really believe you can train people's skills, but you cannot train personality. You can't train values in people. You can try, but it's really hard. So these are things that I would personally like to see in a candidate. Someone who's kind and listens to people, you know? Because if you're an officer, you're going to be recruiting the club and helping a lot of different members through a lot of different stuff. So you want to be an approachable person. Some goals that she held were like listed on there at the time. So what are the specific goals that you are hoping to do for your candidacy? And if you notice, she put something more vague, which is more good on the literature. She put increased engagement and transparency among board and general members. It's more vague on her literature, but you can expand on that in your speech. That is an example of how you can use your literature to your advantage if you choose to do this. Because I don't remember exactly what happened, but during her speech, she mentioned some specific things, which is really helpful. Yeah. So we're going to enter phase 3 with the elections procedure. So how do elections work? There are rules. The first rule is that a quorum must be present, which is half of the club's dues paid membership plus 1, and all votes must be conducted by a ballot. And we're going to be doing this through a Google form that was created by the district, just because we are going to have an online elections due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And to win, a candidate needs a simple majority to win. That's just a fancy way of saying the person with the highest number of votes wins compared to the other votes. So if someone, for example, got 51 votes and the other person got 50, then the person with 51 votes wins. That's it. However, it is also very possible that no candidates will be chosen for a position. And if that happens, the new executive board, the rest who are chosen, will actually decide the next steps. Sometimes new e-boards will decide to have an application be sent out saying if you're interested in being a treasurer, they make it like an appointed board position, but except you're on the executive board. Or sometimes they might not be able to actually find a person for that, and they actually assume those roles themselves. And maybe, you know, give it either one person, which I don't recommend. They usually probably like split the task around among everyone. So if you're interested in running for a position, you should also be interested in having other people run for a position, because it's not a board if only one person is the board. So if you guys are all interested in running for an executive board position, then you should encourage your friends, like everyone else in Circle K, to also run. And you should encourage every single one of like the people you know in Circle K to attend elections. Because if you want to win, you want to be actually, you know, hold a valid election, please make sure everyone attends elections. Just throwing that note out there. It is in your best interest and in the club's best interest, which is the most important thing. And there's also elections etiquette. So only dues paid members can participate and ask questions, and candidates cannot be in the room when their opponent is caucusing. And this is not written here, but elections is also a formal event. I'm going to be requiring at least business casual attire for elections day, but I suggest candidates, like, if this is an unwritten rule, but I really suggest that if you are running for a position, you should be wearing formal attire. So if you're like a more masculine person, maybe dress fully in a suit, like use a tie and stuff. If you're more of like feminine person, honestly, it doesn't really matter what your gender is. Just wear a blazer, basically, or something that looks nice, and wear a tie if necessary. But yes, if you have questions on what formal attire looks like, you can message me after this caucus. Yeah, I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory. However, I understand that there are some people, you know, who don't fit in the binary gender norms, you know, maybe want to dress in something else. Then we could definitely like talk about that. And honestly, like, you do you. Just, you know, you don't want to be showing up in like a t-shirt. Like, just don't show up in your PJs. Show up in something that looks really nice, looks formal, and you are chilling. So there's a cycle that happens in the elections. So on the day of elections, elections will go in the order of hierarchy of positions. So the first elections that will go first is president, and then VPA, VPS, treasurer, then secretary. The steps for this is that I will be opening the floor for any other presidential nominations that were not made on the day of nominations. Second part is that I will be conducting the presidential election, and it will go in order of last name, just so it's more fair. So candidates who present speeches and conduct caucuses. Sorry, I had trouble reading my own sentence. In order last name, blah, blah, blah. So candidates will be presenting speeches and conducting caucus during that time as time allots. So, if it's like 7 minutes and 20 seconds, your time is done. And members will be voting, collecting, and counting the ballots after all that process. And then the winner of the presidential election, assuming there's no tie, will be held. And we're gonna cheer that person, yay! And then the cycle repeats for the next position in the hierarchy. So what happens next? Well, a whole new term starts. But don't fear. You guys are interested in running the old board. So us, someone like me, we will definitely be supporting you guys. So generally the timeline of stuff is as follows. February, so this month, the end of February, is when the new executive board is elected and meets with old board. So this is generally when we write down some personal things that e-board thought about our term and advice for the new e-board, especially in picking out their A-board. And then March acts as the transition period between old board to new board. This is when the new e-board usually, if not necessary, but usually, and I highly recommend, opens up appointed board applications. And then April is the first month where the new board actually starts doing everything by themselves. So this is when the new board actually starts hosting their own general meetings, board meetings, events, deciding what they want to do in their next term. So I'm going to be trusting all of you guys to do that, and I believe in you. So if you guys have some questions and answers, you can raise your Zoom hand to ask a question. If you need more help, have more questions after, you can contact me through my email, or honestly, just message me on Discord.